Morning, everybody. It's Labor Day, and I will toil making a video here for 15 minutes on my Labor Day. I slept in pretty good today. Back to work yesterday, did a nice little gig in the cities. Nice mix of all the different elements. You know, music is so interwoven and rooted in the black experience, black music. And it's so frustrating for me how when I speak with black people about black music, and they can tell how sacred I find it, that they're moved, that they feel empowered by it. You know, I mean, there's electricity, there's an energy that exchanges. But by me, it's not just me complimenting, it's me saying this stuff is important. This stuff can move mountains. This stuff, yesterday I chatted with this black pastor and his wife, and we chanted down Babylon. You know, I mean, we had some things to say, and he was impressed by my preaching ability as it was when it came to black music. And I chatted with a number of other black people in the bar yesterday after I was done, and their understanding of the things I had to say, even if they've never thought of it before, they totally get what I'm saying about the blues, about minimalism, about not needing to be intellectual and play 1,000 notes and not to be complex with the arrangements. You can say a lot with the simple blues. James Brown could say the simplest things ever. It's like, oh, that's good. And if you don't know what he's talking about, you ain't paying much attention. Because it's good. It's that good, high pass. Like that, you know. And again, I've always said black sexuality is a very open frontier. It's the attainable wealth of this life. A lot of these folks know that the mansion on the hill, as I've said before, is unattainable. The Cadillac is a maybe, but Sweet Jelly Roll can't get in the way of that. I'm gonna pursue that on the daily. I'm gonna knock that around. That's you can't take that from me. Short of castrating me, and I know y'all tried that in the past. And the interesting way white folks are offended by the credit that I give to the black musicians and how it's misconstrued, how I'm misquoted, just gets so exhausting. It's so coming from the white American who's not used to hearing the black held in any kind of high esteem, or being praised, or being shown as the ambassadors of American high art. They aren't comfortable hearing the blacks being referenced in that condition. It makes them really edgy. And I gotta say, when I do my YouTube videos, I don't get a ton of pushback. You know, I don't know if it's whether the wall of records behind me, my speech delivery, my confidence, my charisma, I'm not sure. Combination of those things. But I don't get into a ton of arguments when people watch me and listen to me. But if I post something on one of the jazz groups under my real name, so people who don't know me don't know that's the Jazz Shepherd, or never heard of the Jazz Shepherd, and they're just like, see my name, Daniel Van Isle. I could post something with a little bit of controversial or introspective opinions about this type of stuff, and the vitriol and the anger and the, oh, this is ridiculous, what an idiot, the things that they say. It's like, what? Why are you being so aggressive? Why are you being so defensive? I mean, we didn't need to jump right to that tone right off the bat, did we? Couldn't we have dialogued a little first? And so often there's a link to the video that I made that backs up what I'm talking about. They don't even watch that. They just see the headline and get the little hairs up in the ball and like, oh, this guy's an idiot. This guy's bull. Oh, it drives me nuts. Not gonna lie. And then some other guy chirps and he goes, well, this guy's on record for having said the black musicians are better players. And for fuck's sake, I've never said that. If anything, I've said the white cats are often better players. They got better horns, they got better schools, they got better recording studios, they have more education, music training. A lot of the innovation that comes in the late 50s, early 60s comes from the white players who drive composition into new directions. And of course, guys like Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock come along, and they're adding to that mix as well, being well-schooled, young black musicians who come from a bit of a different experience than their forefathers did. But I've never ever said the White Cats were inferior players. If anything, I said they're better players. And I've never once said that White Cats can't play or diminished what they brought to this music. I'm on record for having said, and I'll say it over and over and over again, what a white cat and a black cat have to say is different because of their experience. This is an art form based off improvisation via emoting. And if I'm going to emote through my art form what I feel in a completely unfettered, coded sensibility, there's nothing that's going to filter my honesty. I'm going to be as dead honest as I can be. And even a Miles Davis, who came with somewhat of a silver spoon in his mouth, had a chip against the white man. And he had it pretty good, living in dentist's home, rural St. Louis, you know, Juilliard. Like, come on, Miles, you didn't have it. You know, and he saw racism all the time. And I think he was in the awkward position of often being outside of the black community to some degree because it was better off affluence and upbringing. A black man that wasn't raised in the ghetto isn't always going to be synonymous with people who were raised in the ghetto. I was watching a little bit of Dave Chappelle last night on YouTube, and he was talking about how he always lets people think he was raised in the DC ghettos. But he really was. He was raised in Silver Springs, a more affluent suburb. And he was talking about how when Nas was talking about being in the projects, he was like, yeah, acting like he knew. He's like, I don't know that shit. I don't know nothing about it. You know what I mean? Race doesn't even determine your experience. Your experience does. It just so happens that race demarcates a lot of the experience of males in America. And the white male is entitled and has most things handed to him, and every door is open to them, and the amount of resistance they face is minimal. The obstacles in a black young man's way are almost insurmountable at times, depending on where they come from. And if you can't understand how that different experience is going to make them emote differently in an art form that's all about improvised emotion, you're not hearing jazz. It's not just about the notes and the music and the composition and, oh, look at how complicated that is. That guy's a genius. You haven't heard it. You're missing it all. None of the message or the point or the meaning of this music was ever to impress you with my virtuosity. Look how great a player I am. I can play 17 scales, upside, inverted, backwards, up and down. Parker didn't even think of it that way. Parker was just doing things that felt natural to him. This music was always about a vehicle to express my condition. But I honestly feel some of these idiots are too thick and filled with their own brilliant notions of who they think they are and what jazz is and how great they understand it. It was getting to know black people on a different personal one-to-one community scaled level that I really understood what the black music was. It was no different than the Old Testament, those Psalms, those upbringing words of things gotta get better. And no matter how things are, there's a kingdom laid out for me somewhere with a peace like a river where I'm gonna find a redemption, where my people will find the promised land, the land of milk and honey. You can't even think of those things in affluence, in comfort. It's only an abstract, complete denial of excess in this life. Can you get to a point where you fantasize about what freedom, liberty, justice looks like? Injustice has to be done to you for generations, for you as a people to grasp this is what freedom really is and means. It's got nothing to do with waving a flag. Sorry. It's got nothing to do with carrying a gun. That ain't freedom. That's you living in fear. And if you think living in fear makes you free, once again, the idiot line's right there. What are you afraid of, buddy? You live in a trailer park. The nicest thing you own is that pickup truck. It's got 4 dead carcasses in the back. Everything you own was made in China with a little "We Love America" flag glued on the top of it. You think someone's coming to steal your wife? Your broke-ass barbecue? Your Cheeto Puffs? What are they coming for? What do you need to sit there on guard with your AR-15 protecting? You ain't got enough of nothing for you to be the target of anybody. So the fear is phony and fabricated and designed by people who want to keep you enough on edge that you believe in the bullshit and rhetoric around that industry. It's insanity. It's as insane as all these Americans act like they give a shit about Afghanistan all of a sudden. That money should be spent here at home on much better things than just some fat cat, high-up military people sitting in some bunker in Afghanistan risking the youth of this country and the population of that country. I'm not saying I'm a fan of the Taliban, but it's their country. They have the right to govern as they see fit. We don't have any jurisdiction. And we never really, even after 20 years, were able to really put a flag down and say this is how things are going to be. So I just get really frustrated with the print side of social media. How someone can read something and not even try to comprehend who's saying this, why they're saying it, what's the video attached meaning, it's so shallow and so aggressive and, oh, my dick says this. I gotta argue because I love all that 70s dragon chasing dreamscape blues free, and there's some great stuff there. There is, you know. I'm gonna try to bring myself to put on that Pat Metheny record on ECM, that triple record set, one of these days here soon. The last time I listened to it, I found it kind of boring. Wonderful player, but it's like classical. To me, it doesn't move me. You know, it's the black-white thing on some level. What is powerful to me about jazz isn't about virtuosity. It's not even about improvisation. It's about a man in a rough place, in a pained condition, finding solace, finding purpose and shelter. And like the African mask that I talk about so often, the carver of that mask never set out to be the best carver in Africa. His only desire was to be the best protector of his village, to ward off the evil spirits and the enemy tribes. And in doing so, I have become an amazing carver. But the amazing carver my ego has never been a part of this. This is essential. I'm protecting my children, my wife, my relatives, my community. My shaman rituals aren't just look at me. In fact, they're devoid of look at me. They're done in the most sacred and sincere sense. And that mask is being carved to protect. And the great black jazz musicians were never picking up that saxophone to be like, look at me being the best improviser. You know, it's never been that. I need to pick up that trumpet 3 times a day because I feel safe when I'm there. And it also brings safety and comfort to my community and my people. And by virtue of me doing this on my own 3 times a day and every night for 5 hours in my local venue for my community, in a sense that absolutely mirrors any kind of religious kind of tradition, I feel better. I feel cleansed. My ego never even stepped onto the stage. I was incredible. My virtuosity was on display, but it was a byproduct of the desperation, tyranny, and struggle that has dictated I must play this horn as often as possible because it helps me calm myself. That's a complete different sensation, and it sounds and feels different when I listen to it. It's why I can listen to an Eddie Lockjaw Davis and a Shirley Scott Trio record, and just hear the Black Church and that sense of picnic and community and joy and exchanging of ideas, and again listening to each other before I play. Again, that Ben Webster, Sweets Edison, Billie Holiday, how they were listening to each other and dovetailing and calling. It's all so spiritual and so sincere, and never just about, no, I'm better than you, listen to me, I gotta be on top of you. It was unified. Sweets and Webster are interlocking, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of this, and he's gonna give you a little bit of that, then I'm gonna give you a little bit of this, and he's gonna give you a little bit of that, and then I'm gonna come back out and he's gonna come back, and we're gonna kind of lace our sounds together to help carry and lift Billy's voice. There's no ego in that. There's no ego in blues-driven jazz. It's not about listening to me how great I am. It's about, oh, I got a lot on my fucking mind today. God damn it. Oh, that feels better. That feels better. Let me just keep, Am I tapping into something? Let me get that out of my chest. Let me cleanse my soul. And then we come along saying, oh, white people can play jazz. Yeah, they can play jazz. And there's white cats who have things to say. Chet Baker has things to say. The great Jack Sheldon has things to say, who we're listening to right now. But by God's name, it's not about black players being better. It's about what the black man has to say. It speaks on freedom. It speaks on social injustice and how art can medicate. And how that can make me feel better about my pain and my life. And it can medicate me because I understand the healing power of it. That's what I'm trying to tell people. This music isn't about the complexity of the notes. It's not about the virtuosity of the player. It's about its ability to be a balm for what pains you. Because it's medicated people with far greater sorrow than you in your life can ever imagine if you're sitting here on a TV somewhere watching me. You got a TV? You got a screen in front of you? You don't know what it's like. You've never eaten the remains of the animal that the white folks didn't want and made it delicious. Never done that. You never watched family members disappear, be unjustly incarcerated for lifetimes. You don't know what it's like to step out every day and not know if today's the day I don't make it home. I got kids to feed. I want to get arrested. It's a different kind of stress being a black male in America still today. And so I just get really... I hate being misquoted, first of all. Never said white cats weren't as good a player. In fact, I've been on record as saying they're better players. In some cases, some of the best players were white cats. You know, they could really be more cerebral about it. And that's partly why they drove some innovation, because they weren't just venting today's closet full of agony. They were like, oh, I just came back from the beach. It was nice out there today. My convertible's running good. I got to pick up some turnip on the way home for the wife. Well, you want me to play? Sure, let's do that. Well, listen to this. I got some new ideas, you know? And it's thought out. It's more egos behind it. And that's fine. And there's some white cats I absolutely adore. But don't quote me wrong. Don't try to not even understand what I'm saying. And this is all about that Blue Note being the greatest, most consistent label of all time. Some of the idiotic responses I got to that, man. And again, it was a response to an initial post on YouTube, on Facebook, that had even more idiotic responses in it. You know, everybody who's a jazz fan thinks they're some kind of genius and gets a new level of comprehension. And perhaps I'm the same way. I don't think I am. I don't think my revelations are from a book. They're from having me interacted with the community and seeing the power of what the music is, and how Teddy Pendergrass and Marvin Gaye and Al Green, it was soothing. It was community. It was a place of comfort. It's a different experience, black music and black Americans, than what white Americans have with music. You know, it's just a different thing. And it really, I'm a history geography guy, raised in the church, and seen all these parallels and how history really jumped off the page. And through the speakers, I could hear with clarity some amazing things. And that's why I decided to try to share this stuff. And on YouTube, like I said, I get very little vitriolic pushback and people wanting just to outrage. And I had a few. Mostly just unsubscribe and see ya, you know. Some guy was upset about what I said about Afghanistan the other day, and I'm unsubscribed. It's like, okay, it's not going to change my opinion, you know. I don't believe you give a shit about Afghanistan. The only reason why the right does is because it's costing a lot of jobs. All that money isn't just being spent on nothing. It's being spent on a lot of people being there, and a lot of backup support utility projects being there. These are government-funded things. All those jobs come to an end. So that means a lot of jobs in the sectors that they represent politically are now being stopped. And so, of course, the right's going to be like, oh, we got to protect Afghanistan. No. It just sucks you lost a bunch of jobs, doesn't it? The funding for those jobs has dried up. And if you care so much, you're welcome to stay on your own dime. In fact, go to door in the Christian community, and why don't you raise money to fight the Taliban if you're so concerned about it? You know what I mean? Volunteer your children to go over there if you're so concerned about the outcome of Afghanistan. Stop taking the federal handouts that are preventing us from building infrastructure here and feeding our kids here and not doing the Afghan people any fucking good anyway. Bunch of hypocrites, man. I know you don't care about it. You don't even know where Afghanistan is, most of you. And if you do, it's because you have your son stationed there and his job just dried up. It's crazy. Anyway, we're going to change the subject now. We're going to move on. That's 20 minutes of that. Sometimes I just got to do it. I've had numerous people say to me lately, I need to start a blog. Not a blog, but what's it called? A podcast. And my response to that always like, I don't really listen to podcasts. I don't know much about podcasts. And I don't know if I have the energy and the time to make more sentient thought into a microphone on top of what I do on YouTube. I'm like, why would you need more? And then it's brought to my attention that a lot of people like to listen to my channel without the visual, just having the audio when they go for a walk in the park, at work. They just listen to my dialogue. And a few people even suggested, why don't you just take the audio from your episodes and make them podcasts? And I'm like, that's interesting. And it wouldn't require more thought and more repetition. I want to repeat what I'm saying here and there. But if it's the same thing, it's just a different way to access it when you're doing something different. And again, visually, I show records and stuff, but you don't really need to see me most. I'm not that attractive. I mean, I'm beautiful for 49, you know. But if I'm curious who's interested in having that available. I don't know how to do it yet. I'm sure me and my wife would figure it out. Would you be interested in having the audio from my episodes put into podcasts so you can access them when you're out mobily doing things? The thought never occurred to me that people would want to sit and go for a walk or whatever and listen to me talk about music all day. But I'm very flattered by that. You know what I mean? That's amazing. And I think it speaks to some of the context that my dialogue presents. It's never just me talking about the music and notes and numbers and theory. There's always a context that comes through history and race and my experience in the black community as a DJ and me getting to know hundreds of black men and women really well. And it's given me an insight and I think a new way to look at and talk about black music that the average white person A, doesn't grasp, and B, would have a hard time communicating or saying it, I think. And I think part of my reason I'm okay with it is I am a Canadian. So I don't feel like I'm attacking my country of birth, per se. And I'm never trying to attack America. History is history. You know, and what happens, and Canada by no means has a clean slate when it comes to tyranny and oppression. We've certainly made our share of mistakes. We shared a lot of the same colonial history. The treatment of the Native Americans up there has been appalling, and as it was here. And my God, that's an issue that's pretty much unaddressed here in America today still, is the plight of the Native Americans. Where's that outcry? Where's that outrage? What happened to them is one of the greatest tragedies in human history, along with slavery. This nation was built on two of the greatest crimes ever. The slaughter of the Native Americans and the enslavement of the Africans. It's easy to make wealth when I steal your factory, so I'm going to build it. I don't pay your workers, so I don't got any overhead. I steal the raw materials, and all I got to do is make that profit. It's easy to make fortunes that way. And having stolen the land and having the free labor, you didn't really reinvent nothing, did you? You're not really some genius businessman that made this new fortune. You're just immoral crooks. Monsters hiding behind top hats. If you were a commodore or a baron or one of the kings of finance of the early 20th century, there's blood all over your hands, and your children are going to swim in that shit for generations. Y'all know that. And all those worker strikes that happened, a lot of them brought to us by immigrants who were seeing left, centrist, socialist movements happening in Europe that gave the workers some power, some representation. They squashed that shit here in America so hard. They try to make that shit look like it's the opposite of freedom. And the only thing that's opposite of freedom for is the people who have the wealth. That'd be less freedom for them if they had some regulation placed on them. If they had to pay workers a decent wage. If they had to pay for the raw materials. They don't want to see that regulation. That's not freedom to them. But the fact that they convince us that it's not freedom for us, we dumb. We dumb. It's as simple as that. So again, I'm going to move on, I promise. We're going to talk about Jazz West. One of the greatest little labels. And me and my friend Scott Baldwin have talked about this several times. And release for release, this is one of the hardest punching labels that we have in jazz. They only have 9-10 releases. And if you recall from last episode, I said the 10th release was actually the coupling of the first 2 releases, which were initially on 10-inch on Jazz West. Both by the great Jack Sheldon. And I think number 6, this is number 1, number 2. And I think LP number 6 was a coupling of these two onto a 12-inch. And the Japanese, of course, printed these on 12 inches, which means they're kind of short 12 inches. But I'm guessing it was more affordable for them to simply put these onto 12-inch than to change all the pressing and then bring in the 10-inch formats. But I'd like to get some of the 2 10 inches at some point, but I'm not going to pay hundreds of bucks for them, especially now that I have the music. But so really there's 9 releases. These 2 10 inches here on Japanese 12-inch are the first 2. And let me tell you about Jack Sheldon. He ends up in television in Hollywood, okay? He's one of the great trumpet players that you don't really hear about. And if you like Art Farmer, if you like Chet Baker, you're gonna like Jack Sheldon. He's very versatile. He plays with a bluster and a fire at up-tempo, but it's really at mid-tempo and slow-tempo you hear something that's quite unique from him. There's what I can only describe as a sobbing in his tone. Tears. And again, it's a white cat we're talking about, but you can be plenty pained as a white cat, either witnessing the unfolding or your own life's experiences, family, wife, drugs, the bottle. There's plenty of things that can drive you to the edge. And so white cats can have plenty of feeling. Again, I hate being misquoted. White cats can play their asses off, and Jack Sheldon's a great example. Listen to the tears. It's wet. It's sobbing. It's got some sorrow, a great deal of sorrow. He moves on to the television and film industry and becomes part of one of the great TV bands, if I remember. It's the tip of my tongue. And he becomes a singer as well, but a bit of a show tune singer. you know, but it's kind of lost on people how great a jazz player Jack Sheldon was in the 50s. Jack Sheldon was one of the great players on the West Coast. And if I recall, he worked on a couple of Tom Waits records at some point. And I think tours with Tom Waits, if I remember. Again, my memory's not as sharp as it once was. But these two Sheldon records are fantastic. And the second one, this one's great because it's a Sheldon showcase. And the second one, they add Zoot Sims to the mix, the great tenor player. And Zoot and Sheldon together are absolutely marvelous. It's fantastic. Jazz West #3 is by the great Jane Fielding. And she's a vocalist. She's got a great sense of timing. I listened to almost every Jazz West record the other day with the exception of this one. This has got the great West Coast piano player Lou Levy and the great bass player Red Mitchell. And it's just a trio setting. Maybe it's just a trio with her voice. Yeah, piano, voice, and strings. Gorgeous stuff. Really gorgeous stuff. And true for all these records is they're all really rare. As small a label as it was, the Japanese have reprinted most of it, if not all of it. But you don't find these records very frequently. This record is absolutely outstanding. It's one of the top 3. And again, these are all great records. You know, Blue Note level of consistently great. But again, we're talking 9 releases versus 400. But the great Kenny Drew here, he's just a monster of stride and groove and pattern and dynamic. And whether he's playing a ballad or whether he's chopping it up on something up-tempo, Kenny Drew's a special player, and this is a showcase for him. And one of the real treats on this record is the great Joe Maini on saxophone. He's alto, if I remember. And Maini is a fantastic player. And if you listen to I'm Old Fashioned on this, you'll hear what I'm talking about. This record chops. You know what I mean? That's a great, great Jazz West record. And it might be the best one, but it's really hard to make that call. Number 5 is, again, with Kenny Drew Quintet with Jane Fielding. And this one's going to be a little bit more brighter and up-tempo than the first one, which is just a trio. I got to look at the rest of the quintet. I don't recall. Again, the 2 Jane Fielding I didn't listen to, partly because I listened to them about a month ago. So I listened to everything else but Kenny Drew Quintet is not going to show me. Maybe it's in the small print. Oh, it looks like it's Paul Chambers, Leroy Vinegar's on some of it, Lawrence Marbles on some of it, Joe Maini again. It's a lot of the same guys, and of course it makes sense for labels to use people they already have under contract. Great record. And again, Kenny Drew. Number 6, as I said, was that coupling of the 2 10 inches. Number 7 is the great Paul Chambers, a delegation from the friend Jean-Michel Jean-Michel Reeser Beethoven. I don't know why I did that second time I've done that. Told me the story about this record. Miles Davis was on the West Coast, and Kenny Drew was in the group at that time, along with Chambers and Coltrane and Philly Joe Jones. And this is before Red Garland had stepped in. They're touring out west. Miles up and leaves them. Not a penny to their name. Miles checks out of his hotel and flies home. Doesn't leave them plane tickets. They're stranded in Los Angeles. And rumor has it Kenny Drew punched Miles Davis when he got back to New York. Punched him. And Red Garland joins Miles Davis' group. And there's a long stream of very disgruntled people leaving Miles' group. I don't think Miles is the most fun guy to play with, and I'll go on the record as saying that. This is a pretty sad story, is the way Red Garland got dismissed by Wynton Kelly, and then the way Wynton Kelly got dismissed by Bill Evans, and then he brings Wynton Kelly back, and then Kelly, Chambers, and Jones all leave. Miles, a hard taskmaster, you know, and unlike Frank Zappa, Miles has a lot of demons of his own, a lot of anger. But he leaves them out west, and Paul Chambers like, you know, I know a guy, has a little label. We can go there, probably make the money to get back home. And so they go record for Jazz West, and this is actually a score reissue of it. Again, I don't think I have an original Jazz West record. They're that tough to come by. But you're getting some really raw, hungry Chambers, Drew, Philly Joe, and John Coltrane. Well, so it's one of my favorite Coltrane sessions just because of his youth, his aggression, his dissatisfaction with his current state of affairs. Alec Curtis, Miles Davis. Outstanding session. Really cooks hard. And Score was a little label on the West Coast that would take the funk labels recordings and reprint them. And Imperial also reprints that record, and they were kind of the same thing. Number 8, and this might also be the greatest record on this label. The great drummer Lawrence Marble. He's leading the session here, but it's really the work of James Clay on the tenor that will knock your socks off. James Clay is not a too well-known name. He does a few dates on Riverside that are outstanding. Really great records. If I remember, he's a Texas tenorman. I could be wrong, but I think he goes a Texas tenorman. James Clay's got some blues in him, though, and some fire and some force and some power. Sheldon's killing it. But this record, you see it quite a bit in books, you know, but really it's only kind of the serious next level collector that has the record. And this is a pretty tough record to come by as well. This doesn't look like a Japanese pressing though. Looks like it's Spanish. Yep, Madrid. So we got a Spanish pressing of that. So the only thing domestic I think I have is that Score pressing of the Coltrane. This is an interesting record by Julius Wechter. You say who? Julius Wechter is a vibraphone player. He's a guy that ends up being a pretty predominant figure in the Latin jazz scene, including working with Herb Alpert, if I remember. I'm pretty sure it was Herb. It could be Sir Jim, I'm pretty sure it was Herb Alpert. He composes a couple of Herb Alpert's big hits. And this is in the early 60s. This goes back to 56. And he actually plays vibraphone on a couple of really famous Beach Boys songs and a few other rock and roll songs. He's kind of a studio genius in the late 50s doing stuff in the studios. But he makes this straightforward trio record here. I think it's a trio if I remember, quartet. And this is modern jazz. It's not Latin. It's not pop. It's real jazz made by a great quartet. I listened to it twice the other day. Probably the first times I actually got to hear this one. A lot of things get lost in the mix when I buy them. Cool cover. Not really sure what it's about, but it's a cool cover. Jazz West LP9, Julius Wechter. A name worth recognizing if you see it. And then the last one is an outstanding record, number 10. Art Pepper. And this is one of my favorite Art Pepper records. I'm liking Art Pepper more and more. You know, I feel like his story is very much a drug story, which obviously is true. But Russ Freeman's outstanding on the Shelley Man Leroy Vinegar. But it's Jack Sheldon and Art Pepper together on this that make this a record you want to find. It's really outstanding. And Sheldon, with his tearful tone and his propulsed up tempo, dovetailing with Art Pepper's kind of brittle, angered, tense alto playing. It's just a really great session that has a lot of tension and a lot of feeling to it, and it should be in people's collections if you like that type of stuff. So again, that's 9 pretty incredible records by a label that was only around very briefly. They certainly made their mark, and they've been kind of bought up by other labels, and I think Blue Note repressed some of those, if I recall, after, like, long after Blue Note was in existence. But certainly they're underappreciated today and don't get much publicity today. And you see, like I said, the veteran jazz guys post them without knowing what they are as a young collector. But Jazz West is a label you want to remember. Solid stuff. So let me know if you're interested in me doing a podcast, which again would just be the audio from these episodes for people who just want to walk around listening to me talking about jazz, life, and music in general. I'm sure it's not for everyone, and I totally understand that. I'm guessing it'd probably be 5-10% of people who would be interested in the podcast, but I just want to know if it's worth my time. I'm not even talking from a money thing. I'm just talking about from an interest thing. Is there enough people that would be wanting that? And I know I've had at least 4 or 5 people say it to me in the last couple of weeks, so I know there's some interest. Y'all be safe. Have a great day. Patreon supporters, thank you all. Please, if you have the money, go to my Patreon page and pledge $5 a month. It helps. And if you don't want to do that, go to my merchandise page in the credits below and buy a t-shirt, buy a coffee mug, buy a hoodie, and help support the channel and the coffee shop that's to come. And the last thing I want to put in your ear is we're talking about maybe trying to get a museum title for the collection, and even maybe have school kids come out and me talk to them about jazz. And I know a number of people said your collection should be in a museum, so maybe we can get a museum license or whatever it is. But I don't know. We're just kind of initially looking into that, so I just want to put that in your ear. Y'all be safe. Have a great day. Peace.